Good afternoon, book lovers. Robert Boyd coming at you with yet another book report. Get everything in a space where I can fit it all in. Got my big mug of tea. It's an owl-shaped mug. For a few Christmases, my mom would give me owl things, owl knickknacks, because I'm a alumnus of Rice University, and our mascot was the owls. And eventually, I had to say, "Mom, enough with the owl stuff. I've got all the owls I need." And she got the hint. But anyway, this gigantic mug is chosen because it's clean. Anyway, we're looking at this book today, Super-Fun-Pak Comics by Ruben Bowling. And before I get into the book, I'm going to do a Robin O'Neill and get into a little personal stuff. If you haven't listened to Robin O'Neill's podcast, do so. She's a great artist who studied here in Texas, although now she lives in Washington State. And her podcast is all about reading poems and bits of prose that are meaningful to her, but she always spends a lot of time talking about what's going on in her life. And so I'm going to do a little bit of that. I'm wearing my cowboy hat again today because it got a good review on the last book report. And also drinking out of a big mug got a good review. Although this mug, I don't know. This mug is kind of silly. And I'm tired today because I just spent 3 hours in the new building at the Museum of Fine Arts, the Kinder building, and it was exhausting and an eye-opening experience. Mainly because almost everything they had there, I'd seen a lot of it over the years in dribs and drabs, but they keep most of it in storage. And I don't really know how much they still have in storage. I think they probably have a lot of artwork still in storage. But this place is huge. It expanded, what I've read, is that it expanded the footprint of the museum by 75%. I mean, the fact that I could spend 3 hours in this museum should say something. And I think one thing that a lot of my artist friends have always talked about is how the museum would buy works of theirs and then never show them, or maybe show them once or twice. But this time there were dozens of artworks by Houston and Texas based artists, which I had previously never seen in the permanent collection. So that's wonderful. And just a bunch of other stuff that I had never seen before. And stuff that I'd seen, some of it they moved over from other buildings, and that does make me want to go see the other buildings, just to see how they've rearranged things there. But I didn't do that this time because 3 hours in the Kinder building was exhausting. Museum going, I mean, while I take great pleasure in it, it can be an exhausting activity. Standing is the main exhausting part for me. I enjoyed the opportunity to sit down and watch a William Kentridge video. Just mainly, the video was cool, but mainly because I just needed to sit down. But also just carefully observing artwork, visual artwork, and paying attention to it takes a lot out of you. Anyway, back to Super-Fun-Pak Comics. This is like I said, it's by Ruben Bowling. Bowling is a cartoonist, and Ruben Bowling is his pen name. His actual name is Ken Fisher. He's about the same age as I am. He was born in the same year, 1963. And the name of his comic strip is Tom the Dancing Bug. And this book is not a collection of Tom the Dancing Bug strips per se, although it is. It's just that every now and then he'll take the square shape of the strip that he has, and he'll subdivide it into smaller strips as if it were a Sunday page in a newspaper. And let me tell you a little bit about Tom the Dancing Bug, and a little bit about Ken Fisher. Fisher is a went to he's an East Coast elite. He went to Harvard Law School, and it started as a comic strip in the Harvard Law School Record when Fisher was a student. So it started in the mid '80s, and it started right around the time when alternative news weeklies were getting big, and really great alternative news weekly cartoonists like Linda Berry and Matt Groening were exploding out into America, and these guys, the people who published these newspapers, were looking for new stuff to put in, and sometimes they liked Tom Tomorrow's stuff because it was funny and political, and Reuben Bowling stuff was it was also political, but it wasn't as political as Tom Tomorrow. Tom Tomorrow, pretty much every strip he does is political, but Bowling sometimes he has his fixations that don't have any particularly political content, or if they do, they'll have it in a kind of a oblique way. But he's a very gifted and very funny cartoonist, and he started doing these Super-Fun-Pak comics. I'm guessing he started doing them in 1997 because that's when the first ones from this book appear, and has kept doing them ever since. And the last one in this book is from November of 2019, and this book was published. Let me look real quick. It's published August of this year, so I suspect he hasn't done a lot since then, although probably has done at least a few. And my rough estimate is that he does one or two of the Super-Fun-Paks a month. And it's a weekly strip. I think it's a weekly strip. So that's a significant portion of all the ones he's done. And I'm going to show you some of the Tom the Dancing Bug strips, just so you can see what they look like without the Super-Fun-Pak busyness. And so the first one I'm showing you is one where he does take on a kind of political subject. And the second one is a Lucky Ducky strip, which is an ongoing theme in his comics. And this is one where he's responding to a specific editorial that appeared in the Wall Street Journal back in, let's see, I'm sorry, I wrote this down. I'm not sure when it appeared, but it appeared decades ago now. And it was basically claiming that people who didn't make enough money to pay income tax were lucky duckies. And I think anybody with an ounce of empathy who read that just thought, man, you guys are fucked up. Because, obviously, if you don't make enough to pay income tax, it's because you're poor. And so Wall Street Journal thought, I don't know, that was unfair to rich people, I guess. So his Lucky Ducky strips are all about a plutocrat whose pleasure and enjoying his wealth is undone, repeatedly compromised by the fact that a poor lucky ducky gets something. He continues his Lucky Ducky strips in Super-Fun-Pak, and I think the reason he does that is because he might have an idea for a Lucky Ducky that doesn't quite justify an entire strip, but it can justify one strip out of a whole page of little tiny strips. So I'm going to show you a few of those Lucky Duckies. I'm going to try and show you individual strips within the Super-Fun-Pak page. and give you enough time to read them if you're quick, and then you can decide whether you like them. Um, anyway, a lot of what he does is making fun of comic strips as an art form. He deconstructs them, so to speak. And the question you might ask yourself is, why would someone do this? Why would someone spend this much time deconstructing an art form that is virtually dead? And I'm showing you a pretty good strip about the fact that comic strips are a dead and dying art form. And Bowling, I think the reason is because Bowling's, he grew up reading them. He's just like me. He grew up, he supposedly, he was heavily influenced by Doonesbury, and I am too. I read those when I was in high school and loved them and read them subsequently. I mean, I still think Gary Trudeau is a great cartoonist. So some of the deconstruct the mechanics of comic strips, like the Turing Test comic, which I think I'm showing you right now, is about how comic strips often seem like they could have been written by a computer. They don't seem at all original. The punchline strip is because, you know, comic strips usually end on a punchline, and you could conceivably create a comic strip that was all punchlines. And this kind of recombination of comic strips reminds me of the French literary movement, Oulipo, where they would take, they would take sentences and recombine from different works and recombine them into a new work. For example, the gratuitous epilogue comic just shows you that, you know, there's something else that happens after the end of a comic strip. The poorly placed panels. I'm reading these, reading the titles off, and as I read them, I remember them, because, you know, time doesn't work the same as in a comic strip as it does in real life. The tall comic panel that I'm showing you is like, you know, a cartoonist has to fit a space because a cartoonist is, in a way, a commercial artist, and sometimes you got to do what is needed for that page. And I thought this was a funny panel comic, and a funny use of a tall, thin object to make it fit a particular space. Sometimes he'll make fun of specific comic strips, like one repeating strip that he's done over the years is Dinkle the Unlovable Loser, which is a parody of Ziggy. I don't know if you people remember Ziggy, but Ziggy was a terrible comic strip by, I think the cartoonist's name was Tom Wilson. And it was, you know, it was a strip about a loser type character, but Dinkle is unlovable because he's a monster. And all these Dinkle strips kind of try to top themselves about how horrible he is. And I think they're very funny. Anyway, that Dinkle, Myrtle Mirth, another parody of a terrible old comic strip called the Lockhorns. And the Lockhorns was, you know, a super sexist comic strip about married couple who hated each other's guts. And really, all that Reuben Bowling does is he takes that premise and he amplifies it to an insane degree, where the hatred is literally incandescent, and because it's so far over the top, that's what makes it funny. And it's obviously still funny to him because he keeps doing it year after year. I mean, these strips are spread out over years. One thing he likes to make fun of is superheroes whose name ends with man. And so you can think of Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, Ant-Man, and it's kind of a I'm not sure how. I guess we can blame Siegel and Schuster, the creators of Superman, for it, because it does seem like, how did that become like a normal way to think of a superhero as something man? And he takes this stupid idea that has become the basis for hundreds and thousands of comic books and just runs with it to absurdity, and creates all these superheroes that are something man. somebody was bitten by a radioactive active something or other and becomes something or other man. And so I love these. These are funny, and they also will take ideas that lend themselves to repetition. If he has a good idea, he holds on to it for dear life. So one good idea he had was a chaos butterfly. The idea that the flapping of the wings of a butterfly would would cause, atmospheric motion that would cause chaos somewhere in some very different place. And it's a simplification of the idea. The idea is that the cause and effect of something even as small as the flapping of the wings of a butterfly is so chaotic that you can't really predict what will happen. But he assumes that it will predict, or it doesn't necessarily predict, but it causes terrible disasters years later or weeks later or whatever. And they're very funny, I think. And it's an idea that you can make jokes about for years, which he has done. Another one that he likes to make jokes about are how to draw Doug. And Doug starts off before these how to draw strips as a character that doesn't do anything. He's like Doug, the character that does nothing. And it'll be like 4 panels of this little bear-like creature not doing anything. And then he does this whole series of how to draw Dougs. And they become, again, he'll take the simple idea of like those old ads, like, can you draw this pirate or whatever? Or old instructional manuals for cartooning for kids, essentially. And he takes it to the most insane extremes. And so these are good, but what he likes to do then is once you've got this idea that works, you want to cross it over. Like the chaos butterfly is crossed over with how to draw Doug. So he'll do these crossovers of these ideas. And I'm giving you several of his ideas, but the thing is, this book, he has dozens of these that he'll just repeat variations of over the course of the 20 odd years that this book covers. And here I'm going to show you a whole page of them. It's sort of the non-gay edition of Super-Fun-Pak comics. And this one came out right after Margaret Spelling, who was George W. Bush's the second Bush's Secretary of Education, and she was approved by Congress. And literally right after she was approved, she wrote a letter to PBS about a TV show called Postcards from Buster, which featured gay parents. And she was, she was appalled by this because she was a fucking bigot and still is. And so he took Margaret Spelling's terrible letter and made a whole series of strips on Super-Fun-Pak Comics about making gay characters in comic strips illegal via the Secretary of Gayness. And it was a justified hit on George Bush's repeated anti-gay situation. The book ends with 2 strips that are pretty brutal. One was the strip that came out immediately after 9/11, and basically every strip ends with the phrase, "Terrorists destroyed the World Trade Center, killing thousands." And there's no possible world where a comic strip ends with that phrase and it's actually funny. But if 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 comic strips end with that phrase, it actually does become kind of funny. Then, shortly after Donald Trump was elected, he took that same exact page and he just added Donald Trump to the last panel of each comic strip, bragging about how he got elected president. And And what's great about it is that he didn't change anything except for the addition of Donald Trump, which was, as we now know, a disaster much worse than the World Trade Center, than 9/11. I mean, over 250,000 people dead. It dwarfs 9/11. By the time he leaves the office of presidency, it might actually be 100 times worse than 9/11 in terms of death toll. Anyway, that's Super-Fun-Pak Comics. I hope you enjoyed it, and thanks very much. Goodbye.